All right, let's get right into a truly landmark decision from the Philippine Supreme Court. This is Republic of the Philippines versus Maryland Tenito Manalo G.R. No 221029. And trust me, this isn't just about dry legal text. It's a powerful story about love, law, and what it means to be a citizen in our very interconnected world. Let's dive in.
So where does this all start? Well, like so many stories, it begins with a marriage. We have Marilyn Manalo, a Filipino citizen, who married Yoshino Minoru, a Japanese national. Seems simple enough, right? An international couple starting a life together? But this union was about to hit a major legal wall.
And this is where things get complicated. You see, after they were married, it was Marilyn Manalo, the Filipino spouse, who went to court in Japan and was granted a divorce from her husband. That one action, totally legal in Japan, set off a huge legal battle all the way back home in the Philippines.
Think about this for a second. This slide really captures the bizarre legal limbo she was in. Over in Japan, she was legally divorced, a single woman. But back in the Philippines, a country that doesn't have a general divorce law, she was still considered legally married to a man who, in his own country, was no longer her husband. She was trapped in what was basically a one-sided marriage.
Okay, so to make sense of how the Supreme Court unraveled this whole thing, we're going to follow the classic case digest format. We'll walk through the facts, pinpoint the central issue, get to the ruling, unpack the reasoning behind it, to find the huge legal doctrine that came out of it, and finally look at what the court actually ordered.
First up, let's lay out the facts. We need to trace Manalo's journey through the court system to really understand how she ended up at the highest court in the land.
So the timeline is pretty straightforward. She marries her Japanese husband. Then, in 2011, she gets a valid divorce decree from a Japanese court. A year later, in 2012, she goes to a Philippine court to do what seems logical, file a petition to get that foreign divorce recognized, and, super importantly, get her marriage record in the Philippines officially canceled.
But it wasn't that easy. Not at all. The very first court she went to, the regional trial court, flat out denied her petition. They stuck to a really strict reading of the law. But she appealed, and the Court of Appeals saw it completely differently. They reversed the RTC's decision, even calling the situation the height of injustice. Well, when you have two lower courts in total disagreement, you know where this is headed, straight to the Supreme Court.
And this brings us right to the heart of it all. The one central legal question that the Supreme Court was being asked to finally settle.
Okay, everything, and I mean everything, hinges on this one part of the law. It's paragraph 2 of Article 26 of the Family Code. Now, this law was literally written to deal with situations like this. It says that if a Filipino is married to a foreigner and that marriage ends in a divorce obtained abroad by the alien spouse, then the Filipino is also free to remarry.
And here it is, the million-dollar question. The law specifically says the divorce must be obtained abroad by the alien spouse. But what happens if the Filipino spouse, like Marilyn Manalo, is the one who actually filed the papers? Does the law still work for them? That is the exact question the Supreme Court had to answer. So after all that build-up, what did the Supreme Court actually decide? Let's get to their final definitive ruling in this case. The decision was crystal clear, no ambiguity. The Supreme Court affirmed the Court of Appeals' decision and ruled squarely in favor of Marilyn Manalo. This was, without a doubt, a monumental victory for countless Filipinos in the same boat. And the court didn't waste any words. In answer to that central question, does the law apply? The decision simply says, we rule in the affirmative. Just 3 words. It's so powerful and direct. That single sentence settled this huge legal debate and set an entirely new precedent.
But how? How did the court get to that conclusion? Let's unpack the ratio decidendi, which is just the legal term for the core reasoning that drove the decision. The court's entire justification really stood on 3 main pillars. First, they had to prevent a completely absurd legal situation. Second, they needed to make sure everyone got equal protection under the law. And third, it was about looking at the spirit of the law, its real purpose, not just the literal words on the page.
So that first point, avoiding absurdity. The court explained that the whole reason this law exists is to fix this bizarre legal fiction. It's meant to stop a Filipino from being legally chained to a foreign ex-spouse who is totally free to move on. The court basically said, look, it doesn't matter who started the divorce, the ridiculous outcome is the same. And this leads right into the equal protection argument. The court reasoned that whether a Filipino is the one filing for divorce or the one receiving the divorce papers, their situation is identical. Either way, their foreign spouse is no longer married to them. To treat these two Filipinos differently just based on who filed the paperwork, well, that would be discriminatory. Finally, the court really zoomed in on the exact wording of the law. It says, the divorce has to be validly obtained abroad. It never, ever says it has to be initiated by the foreigner. The court applied a classic legal idea here. Just read the words as they are. And the plain language simply didn't back up the government's much narrower interpretation. So, what's the big takeaway here? What's the long-term impact? Let's talk about the legal doctrine, this landmark case established for every case that comes after it.
And here it is. This is now known as the Manalo Doctrine. It makes it clear, a foreign divorce can be recognized in the Philippines no matter who started it, the Filipino or the foreigner. All that matters are two key things, that the divorce was validly obtained under that foreign law, and that the divorce legally allows the foreign ex-spouse to remarry. The court also laid out two crucial steps for anyone in this situation. You can't just say you got a divorce. First, you have to prove it's a fact by showing the official, authenticated divorce decree. Second, you have to prove the foreign law itself. You have to show the Philippine court that the law in your ex's country actually allows for that kind of divorce.
Okay, let's wrap this up with the court's final order. What was the actual practical outcome for Marilyn Manalo herself?
But there's one final twist. Even though Manalo won the huge legal argument, the Supreme Court didn't just give her what she wanted on the spot. The case was remanded, which means it was sent back to the original trial court. Why? Because she still had to complete that second critical step. She had to formally present evidence to prove what the Japanese law on divorce actually is.
You know, the Manalo case is just such a powerful example of how the law sometimes has to adapt to human reality. It's a recognition that in our modern, interconnected world, rigid laws tied to one nation can lead to real injustice. And so, we're left with a pretty big question to think about. How does this landmark ruling on private international law continue to shape the future of Filipino families in our ever more globalized world?